Hi, Wool Academy podcast listeners. Thanks for tuning in to yet another episode. This is episode 112, and this is also another Flock Wool episode. And that means that I will be joined again by Evan Thomsen. He's the CEO of Flock Wool, which is a little Albanian wool trading company that I was honored to join this year. And when Evan and I decided to document our journey of Flock Wool here on the Wool Academy podcast, we were very clear about the fact that we would be, really taking you behind the scenes and not showing you only the positive things and what's happening, but also the negative things. And this is exactly that kind of episode where we'll be sharing our difficulties because of the Corona pandemic crisis. We have kind of come to a standstill and don't have that many options at the moment. So Evan and I will be talking about the current situation and sharing with you what we're going through. And I hope you find it helpful and enjoy the episode. I'll talk to you again at the end of this episode. Bye for now. Well, good morning, Evan. Welcome
Morning.
to the yet another show of the Wool Academy podcast. Today might be a little bit of a difficult episode for us. And I already said this in my introduction to this episode, but I'm going to repeat it a little bit again because you weren't there. So when you and I kind of committed to doing this podcast, we were very clear that we would be sharing our journey of Flock Wool, and that would include kind of the good, the bad, and the ugly, as you say, and that we would tell it as it is and not hide anything. And so that brings us to today's episode. And maybe also when this launches, we're actually going to launch two more episodes at the same time because we kind of got into a backlog. So this is before we recorded an episode where we talked about collecting our wool, and that was kind of end of May, beginning of June. And it was a short episode where we were really excited that we collected our first wool. And then we did another episode that will also launch now about the lean methodologies and creating a minimum viable product. And there we talked about applying to those concepts, and just our goal was to collect one container of wool. And maybe anyone who's listening to this first, you are very welcome to go to those other two episodes, because then things might also make a little bit more sense of what we're talking today. But that brings us, it's now the end of July, and that's also why we wanted to publish these three at the same time, because otherwise this story would only air in 1 month, and then it's not like, then we're not really, I don't know, and it's dragging things along and we're not really telling it as it's happening. But what's happening, Evan?
Yeah. So obviously what's happening. So we've already talked about how the coronavirus situation from an economic perspective has impacted the company in the initial stages. We talked about some of those things, but ultimately that conversation was as much theory as it was, stuff that was actually happening. This one won't be any theory. it will be what has happened. And so us working around, travel restrictions, shutdown, open restrictions, potential trade issues, getting our bailing worked out and stuff like that. So we talked about situations like that. This is a little bit different. Essentially, the situation that we're in right now is the market for our wool, for coarse wool, has really taken a hit. People in the industry who we've spoken to have used much harsher language than we are at the moment. But yeah, it's been hurt very bad. There are even fairly, sad stories of things that some farmers are put in situations to do with their sheep, whose wool is no longer valuable, who didn't have savings, or not in Albania, of course, but in context of countries where wool is a major commodity. there are farmers that have been put in difficult situations. So this is a global market phenomena that has kind of occurred where the price of coarse wool has dropped dramatically, and in some places to negligible. And so no one's buying it, and no one's selling it. And so yeah, that's was a not good timing on our part. We couldn't have predicted this. We didn't predict this pandemic, and so yeah, we now have wool in a warehouse that we can't move. Is the general situation.
Yeah, and maybe let's dive a little bit deeper of how the situation kind of unfolded. So when we collected wool at the end of May, beginning of June, which was already kind of a month later than we had expected. And that was already when the pandemic, and we collected data because of the pandemic. And then, yeah, what started from there once we had the wool in our warehouse? How did the events unfold?
Well, obviously, the way markets end up responding to events like this, every single sector or even every commodity or job description within the sector, they're not impacted equally or evenly or at the same time. So it's not accurate to say, okay, day one of the pandemic, all of the things that were to happen in the market happened on that day. It's like, well, no, that's not how it works. So in fairness, like we've seen, how countries have responded and how the impact on different countries has been different, and how countries that weren't hit that hard then became hit hard. And, some countries are on a curve like this. Everybody's seen the different curves, right? We've all talked about curves at this point. So that's happening unevenly, the impact of the pandemic from a health perspective, and then the health perspective leads into the economic perspective, and then there's varied impacts on the market. We could, of course, speculate, well, okay, wool, carpeting, and rugs are more of a luxury product. Significantly less people are buying that right now, while there's so much economic uncertainty. So what's that going to do to the coarse wool industry? And so that's pretty good theory, I think, and I think that's probably it. But of course, that's something that sets in over time. That's not something that happens instantly. I don't think there's anybody that would suggest that wool is that the price of wool is hyper volatile with global events. Like, for example, the price of oil, that is hyper volatile with certain global events. You can measure that to the day almost, but yeah, wool, not the case. So that's why there's a bit of a lag. So, that probably explains the lag. And then, we were, again, in continued talks with our partners, and they weren't having any problems. Everything was, fine. Like, and in some cases, good. We're dealing in the flooring industry with, one of our partners deals with a lot of products on the lower end of the flooring industry. And so business for them was booming because this was a good event for them and a good economic event for them in many ways. But, with that partner and with the people that they had connected us with, and, again, we in the United States, we're headquartered in Dalton, which is the carpet capital of the world. So you can look up the companies there. So we've spoken with a handful of multi-billion-dollar corporations, about our product. And so we had people very interested. And even to the point of we're ready to draw up a purchase order. They're making the final step of connecting us with, exactly where this is going to go. I think the last thing I told our primary contact for sales was, at this point, we can have our wool at the port within a week. You tell us where the boat's going and we'll have it there. So like that's the stage we were at. And then 2 weeks later, it's just, again, I think the specific message I got was that everyone I've spoken to, this guy who knows everybody from China to Belgium to the United States, he said, everyone I've spoken to says they can get New Zealand wool for almost free. No one would take the risk on Albanian wool right now. And it's like, yep, that's true. And there's no structural way around that market reality for the time being.
Yeah, and I remember, we have our regular team meetings, and I remember 1 week we were discussing for our colleague Albi to get all the shipping papers ready.
Yep.
And as you said, we were just waiting kind of like where it should be shipped. And then 1 week later, or in between, you already send messages, Albi, stop everything. We need to wait for more instructions. We have to get more information. And then already the next meeting, we kind of had a totally different discussion.
Yeah. It was a quick process.
Yeah. So maybe take us through a little bit then of, kind of, so the discussion we had to have then once we understood that the situation has changed and we couldn't get our wool out of our warehouse.
Yeah. So I sent out an email. Yeah, that's where we're at. So just to clarify, right, behind to break the fourth wall, right? That's where we're at. So so at that point, I'm thinking like, okay, well, we no longer can operate business as usual. We no longer can act as if we have the same strategy before us. We have a very different reality. We have to shift our approach. And so I sent out an email, essentially saying three things. The first thing was, hey, we couldn't have predicted this. And that's what a lot of companies have said. Obviously, that's not a excuse, of course, but it's just recognizing the facts that, like, we couldn't have predicted this, and we did everything right. For a group of people from 3 different countries that didn't really know each other a year ago, to try to gather up wool in a country that's not gathering up wool, and to get that done with, you're the only person from the wool industry in our company, and then you've never had an operational role on the ground in that sense. So it's just like, we've done everything right. We collected it. We didn't overspend. We kept to our budget. Like, I mean, that's how many companies can say that, their first year of operation, they were able to accurately account for expenses in a reasonable enough way. So we did it. We got the warehouse. We collected the wool. We bailed it up. We had to dodge around coronavirus. And so that was the first point I had to make, is that I thought, well, everybody did their job and did it well. But the second point was that we have to change strategies, and I offered basically 2 approaches: is either we innovate or delay. And innovate basically meant, okay, we have wool and bales right now, and we think it's going to be carpet, and that's kind of how we've been acting. It's going to be a carpet or a rug, or maybe insulation, something like that. But what if we were innovative? What if we completely reimagined this? And again, I don't know. We don't know. But maybe that's what we could do, and see what the options are. And then the other option is delay and do what pretty much everybody else is doing right now, and just keep it in the warehouse and wait. And I mean, that's what all the other wool companies are doing right now for the most part. I'm sure you've seen, you've sent us some reports as well. That might as well be the formal market guidance at this stage. Sit it in the warehouse, sell it later, and so that's kind of where we're at. And then the third point was that, yeah, we're all co-owners of this company. It's for us to decide as a group. It's not for me alone to decide. It's for everybody to determine. And so, yeah, then we had a very long conversation based upon, what I outlined in that email and what our thoughts were.
Yeah, and I then asked in our group call, like, so why isn't there the third option of just giving up? So why didn't you put that in your email, like, as a third option?
Well, and what I said on the call, I'll quote myself from the call. There's technically always the option of give up.
So you don't even need to mention it, because it's like a given at any point.
Of course, yeah, it's a given.
Okay.
It's a given at any point. Yeah, and we could next month. It's unlikely, but it's technically always true. It's like that's the nature of free enterprise. Free to do whatever the hell you want, right? Mm-hmm. So yeah, I mean, but from my perspective, the reason why it doesn't make sense to stop is because, okay, the cost of storing this wool, it is a cost, but it's just like, well, it's not, that's the wrong mentality in my opinion. It's not the cost of storing the wool. It's the cost to continue to speculate on whether we can sell this wool into the future and it be a price that makes the business unit viable. If we have to incur more costs due to the delay, due to a pandemic, which is not part of the business model, okay, so like, but, I mean, unless pandemic economy sets in as the normal, but like, I doubt that. So, um, we would have more problems than a wool company if that were the case. Um, but, um, but yeah, it's the cost to speculate into the future on whether the business unit can be viable according to the strategy and model that we put forward. And so if it means that $1,000 has to be spent on warehousing over the next 6 months, and for people who are hearing that quote, yes, that's the cost of doing business in Albania. So it's not unbelievable to speculate in that way when that's the only cost we're going to incur. And so we can handle that. I can handle that. It's a worthwhile investment. So, okay, so the financial side of things, there's no reason to financially, because it's, again, the mentality of we're burning money. No, we're not. We're paying to speculate. And it's the initial question has not been answered. Is this a viable business or not? Right? We still haven't answered that. We haven't sent that. It hasn't been, we haven't seen end users interact with our product and say, it's worth this much, or it could be worth that much if you do X, Y, and Z, so that's what has to happen. We have to let it interact with the customer, and now we literally can't do that. So it's worth speculating in the future. Second thing is, obviously we've worked well together. That was your point. So maybe you can talk about that. And so that has definitely been exciting. But the third and the more important thing is none of us want to, and that's not like stubbornness or bullheadedness. I think that's like a cause du jour of businesses. Okay, what do you want? What are you willing to, keep in your life right now? And all of us, are on the same page on that. We want this, in our life right now. We're willing to tolerate some setbacks and some disappointments, because we're crazy enough to believe that we can make it happen. That we can, not just sell a container of wool, but make an impact on the wool industry in an entire nation. And so, and if we didn't have that belief, then we should have never started.
Yeah,
and if that belief can be shaken by an event that throws you off course, then we don't have the fortitude for any entrepreneurial venture, let alone one of this magnitude. So yeah, I think that's why it's like, well, no, I'm not advocating on behalf of give up. Even though give up could occur for completely different reasons, like if the financial reason came up, then, well, that would be very, very different. It's like, well, okay, we literally can't afford this right now. And so
yeah, just to, because we mentioned the lean methodology, and you said that we're trying to prove that we have a viable product, which at this point in our business isn't the same as proof that we have a profitable product. So the profitability may come at a later stage once we know if there's value in our product, or is that the same, viable product and profitable product?
Oh, I guess I generally mean the same thing. I'm willing to accept at this stage, because we've had to take more costs, because we will take more costs that we're not at all accounted for due to now the future delay, right? Our costs so far have been under control. The costs going forward are new. What's the likelihood of profitability the first moment we're able to sell out of this condition? Like very, very, very low, but whereas before that was, a more important threshold. At this stage, like I'm accepting the fact that we're probably going to lose money on this. Again, of that product coming out of lowest price ever situation to, okay, now it's actually back on the market, to what we've actually had to spend for all the other things to wait for that day to come. So yeah, the conditions have changed a bit, but this is, the other thing I said was, this is why you do it the lean startup way. Because if we would have thought, let's get 5 containers, well, now we spent tens of thousands of dollars needlessly, so now we've just spent a few $1,000s. It's like, okay, well, can we afford yes, we can afford a few $1,000s to speculate on a business process, right? So, So yeah, this is exactly why follow that playbook, is so you don't find yourself in a situation where you have this massive expenditure that you actually haven't validated yet. So you have the minimum viable product, minimum expenditure, minimum operation, to get something into market. And it's like, okay, well, we've done that. We haven't done anything more than that. Now we're having to spend slightly more just to delay. But yeah, I think that hopefully explains kind of.
Yeah. So kind of we're still trying to validate kind of, but so if we do validate that we have a viable product, then the profit would come at a later stage because of this delay. So like profit and viable product might not come at the same time, kind of, but we will validate that we can make a profit in the future.
It will, yes. That will be the more important thing. Is that whether this is viable or not is whether we can actually look and say, okay, based upon what was earned here and at scale, what does that look like? Because almost no matter what anybody would buy this for, one container is not going to be profitable, effectively, or even if it is, it wouldn't be worth our time. So it's always a question of, okay, what is this at scale?
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah.
Yeah, and then because you mentioned that during the last question that I had said, okay, we did work as a team. Like I didn't know any of you, and okay, you've known Tiana for a very long time, but the rest of the team,
we've known each other for a while.
But you, like Albi and Gertie, you've only known maybe a year and a half, or so. I mean, for 5 random people from 3 different countries to come together and pull this operation off, and all of us not really, having done this before, I thought we did a pretty good job and we worked very well together, like as a team. And I thought that was quite special because that doesn't happen all the time. And so I thought we had to value that as well and honor that and see potential in us being able to do even, more with that. So that's what we said.
And you liked your early morning Albanian burek.
That was the food that we had?
In the morning, yeah.
Yes. So of course, like this is our individual situation, but as you said, like this is happening across the industry. This is happening across other industries. Like I guess nobody's not affected in some way. And like also in my consulting business, things have slowed down. There's not that much business because everybody's careful in spending their budgets. So I feel like I kind of feel that like I don't have the right to moan because like everybody's affected, so so also I think this episode isn't about us pitying ourselves or anything. We're rather telling the story to kind of maybe also other people might feel the same and see, oh yeah, okay, I'm not alone in this, but also like, is there something we can learn from this? Is there something that will make us stronger going out of this? So can we look at this on a like different perspective? Or
well, I'm not sure yet. So like if in the case of we have an established company that has an operating budget and savings and a large customer base and stuff like that, right? Years of doing business in wool specifically. They're in a very different position. They're just like, okay, oh, all right, the prices aren't amenable to us, because this happens, right? The wool companies, warehouses, suppliers, whatever, they'll put their wool on blocks for a few months to wait for the prices to shift because they can. So they're already used to doing this. Now, this is slightly different. There's more, it's more than just a undesirable price. It's like, wow, the market has just been, borderline obliterated by the impact of coronavirus. But still, regardless of why, you know, the what for a company that's already dealt with price shocks and price fluctuations is more or less going to be the same. They've already done this. They already have a process for this. They already have a procedure. In our case, we're in a very different position. You know, this was the very beginning, and you know, anybody who's read the literature on, you know, there's been, I think there's even been TED Talks on this, you know, the reasons why businesses succeed or fail. The number one, timing.
Okay.
So I'm aware of that. I'm aware of the number one reason why businesses succeed or fail is timing. And of course, most of that study had to do with technology companies, but it's still an interesting point, whether you think it's perfectly applicable or not. It's a salient point. But our timing has obviously been terrible. And what can we learn from that? It's not like I mean, you know, again, it's not like we were sitting around like, well, you know, all right, guys, let's plan out the business. You know, what if this goes right or that? What if that goes wrong or that? You know, what if we're over budget? What if we miscalculate this? What if we have problems with that? We've already faced a lot of those things, you know, and we've gotten over it. You know, like we've innovated around the baling issue. We've innovated around the bales material issue. We're working with the potential development initiative that might be analyzing the product. We've spoken with your colleagues. We've spoken with people in Australia. We've spoken with people in New Zealand. We've gotten connected with some of the biggest carpet companies in the world, you know, in Dalton, Georgia. So, you know, we've literally, dang it, even gotten connected with a Albanian immigrant to the United States who's worked in the carpet industry and who's a billionaire. You know, so it's like we have this probably the most interested person in the world capable of helping our company, like who could be involved. Even he's like, no, the carpet, well, not now, not now. You know, like how, like, what's the lesson learned from a situation that no reasonable person would have at all thought like, okay, well, what's our plan if a once in 100 year pandemic spreads across the world and shatters the market for almost all luxury goods? And that would have been considered woolen carpets and rugs would have fallen into that category. Maybe not luxury, but, you know, luxury-ish, higher price item good. And because especially home buying went on decline too, and home renovations went on decline, and people started saving more. And, you know, so like when you look at the macroeconomic trends in America, for example, savings went up, skyrocketed, like it was crazy. You know, and that's okay. You know, when people are saving, we're saving, you know, like look at my individual economic behavior is inadvertently harming our company. But I mean, I'm not entirely sure if there's a lesson learned, because it's an interesting situation. And then that's kind of the nature of, I think I've spoken about Nassim Taleb on this podcast already in some sense, but I like Nassim Taleb, you know, and he talks about randomness a lot, and he talks about shock events like this, and, you know, and black swan phenomena. Like, there are aspects of this that are similar to that are events that you couldn't have predicted. So we could have reasonably predicted a pandemic, but we couldn't have predicted all of the shocks of it, right? We couldn't have reasonably predicted all of the economic shocks or the specific economic shocks. But even though this is an unpredictable thing, the specific economic shock to the coarse wool industry, right? It is having an outsized effect on our company. Arguably, it's the effect on our company. And the very definition of those things is that you can't predict them. And something that you have no facility to predict, you can't really say that you have a framework for learning, right? That being said, the question then, and I don't have any answer to this, but the thing that I'm thinking about is, you know, what, if anything, can we do as a company to gain from this disorder? You know, like, so that's the maxim of Taleb. How do you guard against events that are shattering like this and that are random and seemingly random and unpredictable? you become anti-fragile. So how can we build anti-fragility, into our company as well? And that's something to think about. Maybe simply us telling this story like this is something that could be that. We could garner interest in our company, maybe not today, but for the future, because we're speaking as we are. I don't know very many companies. I don't know very many executives that go out there and say, here is how my company is failing like mad right now. And here are all of my thoughts, unfiltered, about what has gone into that, the decisions we've made in response to it, and why. I don't know, that's pretty bold. Companies go out there and say things about what they believe about, various social causes, and maybe believe that or maybe don't believe that, but they post things on social media. But what we're doing right now is saying, like, well, here are the actual challenges that we're facing. Like, here's a look behind the scenes of what's actually happening in the company. This is not marketing material. This is an honest conversation of what the problems are. And so maybe, if anything, that's a learning lesson and in one approach to thinking about things. But that being said, I'm not saying we're necessarily people to listen to. We haven't succeeded.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, so we could have, maybe, but again, we don't know. We literally don't know. There are a lot of old companies out there that are very successful. We're not one of them. I hope we are someday, but today it's not today, and that's the fact, so maybe people are able to learn from us, or maybe people don't listen to us on the basis that we're not there.
Yeah, and I mean, another thing that I was like researching about and thinking about is that we have kind of two different markets. We have the wool market for fine wool, which trades at a much higher level, and we have the market for coarse wool, which we are in, which anyways already before this pandemic has been suffering, and prices didn't come off the ground. There are so many stories, and that is actually also probably the case in Albania, that like shearing the sheep costs more than actually the money that you're getting for it, and there was literally no market for Albanian wool, and that's why it would go to waste and just biodegrade in the ground. So what is the answer to? So right now, coarse wool is really a commodity, and that's why it's so risk at these very changing prices and low prices. Like, is there a way out of coarse wool being a commodity and actually having more of a value?
Well, that's I think the kind of the initial problem that we talked about a while ago, and that we know a lot of people have talked about, but that nobody has actually been able to brand coarse wool. If we remember, we really started with that type of a problem, and we didn't really focus on that because we were just like, well, at the end of the day, we're pretty sure we have this market over here, and if we're able to connect Albanian wool to the carpet industry, we would have a price advantage than competitors. And if we could, make process improvements to the product, growth through breeding practices, shearing and value adding practices, and the right fit over a few years, then we'd have significant advantages. And that's just of course, it's sexy to create a good brand, of course, but when you have that type of an opportunity, you have to go for that. Maybe it's something we look at again because of this delay. But yeah, the problem of there is no brand for this. Merino has a brand, and even right now, face masks, merino wool face masks, but you can't coarse wool a face mask. That would be, that would not be comfortable, so it's just like, dang it, even the face mask, merino sheep, man. But but merino sheep are great, and they produce an amazing product, and so are Ruda, and so are Bardoka sheep, and we need to and we still have the need of truly creating that brand. And part of that is going to come down to an actual product that demands that type of wool. And carpets and rugs, yeah, but like, you know, carpets, who has an emotional attachment to carpet and rugs, you know what I mean? Or insulation, right? Like with a, you know, a wool sweater, you know, you can have an emotional attachment to that. You know, a wool scarf, a wool, you know, wool types of clothing and apparel, wool socks. I mean, who is a hiker and doesn't have several pairs of wool socks that they love?
Because they don't get blisters
and they have a brand that they love, you know, and they're loyal to that brand, and they'll get in arguments about that, you know, but no one would do that with a rug or a carpet, you know what I mean? And so, you know, maybe there isn't the right product fit, and you know, maybe that can change. So I think there's more than just the branding problem. I think there's also a product innovation that demands, you know, a higher caliber of wool that is a product that is something that actually does create, you know, that emotional attachment. And I don't think, right, the customer isn't wrong for having an emotional attachment to carpets or rugs. They're not, you know, like that's there. I would say that that's kind of an answer of people. And, you know, we can't condemn people for how they think. It's how I think. It's how you think, you know. So I think it's more than just the industry itself. I think it's also an end product when it comes down to it, or, you know, or unless we just surrender the fact that nobody is interested in coarse wool, from an emotional perspective, that it's purely a practical product, you know. And if it is, then, you know, our strategy was right. Get it in the carpet, be practical, think about price. Albania beats other countries in terms of price, and it will a year from now when the prices go back to normal. That's still true, you know. And if we're able to make the right product fit, then we have a huge advantage, and we're going to exploit that. But do we have to wait a year for that? Maybe.
Maybe longer. That we don't know.
Yeah. Unless somebody, because I've read two or three different articles about this now, of people really trying to innovate Kevlar with wool. And I'm really interested in that, because our brand is, we have the strongest wool from the toughest sheep, from a nation built on resilience. So we're going all in on, we have the strongest wool on the planet. Albanian sheep, especially the Bardoka, are basically like the special forces of sheep. They camouflage into the side of the mountain. They climb mountains all the time. They deal with harsh and inclement conditions, and they keep driving on like there isn't even a problem. So these are already like your Ranger Green Beret sheep that are out there. And then their wool is some of the strongest wool that you're going to get. So if, you know, when there's a product need for that gets people motivated, like potentially Kevlar, which would be amazing, you know, then I think we have the ideal, you know, product fit. But yeah, we're not there, but we got to keep fighting for it, I guess.
Yeah.
So.
Well, thank you so much, Evan, for revisiting all the discussions we had, and sharing what we are going through. And yeah, I think we will just continue doing this. We do also have other guests on the show, so there have already been a few recordings that will publish after this, because of course for us right now things will be a little bit slower, so we will also maybe talk a little bit less often, but we also still have more ideas we want to discuss, you and I, here on the podcast. So yeah, I think that's it for now. Let's see what kind of comments and reactions we get. We would be very interested. We always love when people reach out to us. We have had a few people contacting us on LinkedIn or through our website. So we're always open to connecting with everyone and discussing our wonderful Albanian wool and our adventure here at Flock Wool. So yeah, I'll talk to you soon. Have a good rest of your day.
I will, you too.
And bye for now.
All right, we'll see you.
Bye. Hey, thanks for listening all the way to the end. I do hope you enjoyed this episode and found it of value. If you want to find out more, then head on over to the show notes at elisabethvandelden.com/112, or visit the Flockwool website at flockwool.com. And of course, if you have any comments or suggestions or ideas of how we can get out of this current situation, then contact us. We are available on LinkedIn, and you also find our contact details on both my website and the Flockwool website. I look forward to hearing from you, and I see you in the next episode, where I will be talking not to Evan Thomsen, but to Tone Tobiasen, and we will be exploring how wool is used in other European countries. So I hope you tune in. Bye for now.